Welcome to the Microcast, the short-form podcast from Microcosm Coaching, where we break down the science, strategy, and psychology behind smarter endurance training. Each week, we tackle a key concept in running, training, or recovery, and we give you practical tools you can apply right away, whether you're building back, leveling up, or chasing down a big goal. We keep it short, evidence-based, and grounded in real coaching experience. No hype, no fluff, just actionable insights to help you train sustainably and perform at your best. Let's get into it.
Ready to run your best marathon in Boston? The Microcosm coaching team has you covered with our Boston Marathon 2026 Prep webinar series. This is a 4-part live program designed to help you crush every mile from Hopkinton to Boylston. Led by certified run coaches at Microcosm, this series dives deep into Boston's legendary course. From those early downhills to heartbreak climbs, you'll learn how to train smart, fuel right, and show up confident and ready for race day. For just $100, you'll get access to all 4 sessions, plus access to our Microcosm Foothills tier, which means ongoing community support, Slack access, and live Q&As with coaches leading up to race day. Whether you're chasing a PR or soaking in your first Boston experience, this is your roadmap to success. Spots are limited, so head to the link in our show notes and join the Run Your Best Marathon at Boston series today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Little morning podcast.
We're doing a morning podcast because I've had multiple work days that were 14 hours long.
Wow,
so,
you're feeling good. You're feeling fresh.
Really good and fresh. I mean, fresher than if we had tried to record this at like 9 o'clock last night after a long day. So
that's just not going to happen.
Not good. Not going to be giving my best coaching advice in that circumstance.
My work day's over at 5. I try to be very strict about that.
You know, owning a independent media company is a hell of a thing.
Yes, it
support
is.
Your diet sucks. I'm very tired.
Well, you're also highly caffeined.
I would say moderately. You can see my mug.
Oh,
I've
wow.
had half a mug of coffee.
Well, I'm 3 espresso shots deep at this moment, so I feel good.
Really, you do 3 shots?
Just today.
Wow.
I slept deeper than normal last night. I feel like...
So you're going to be all hopped up just for the podcast.
Hopped up for the podcast.
This is why we don't record in the mornings.
Ready for my VO2 max
So
workout.
ready. Same. But yeah, I'm really excited to chat today. We have some baller hotter knots. Thanks for everyone who's been emailing us both their questions for the podcast for us to answer so that we don't have to trawl Reddit, or if we do, it's just for recreational purposes. So yeah, hotter knots, we're going to answer a question from Reddit. And then today, the bulk of our episode, we're going to talk about long runs.
Yes.
Because that's something that I think is going to be relevant for pretty much every athlete. I think it's something that, folks are always looking for input on, like, how do I pace this? How do I fuel this? How do I get the most out of my long run? Why does it feel so hard? How can I make it feel easier and more fun? So I'm an ultra runner like through and through. So, I'm always jazzed to talk long runs.
Well, our marathon runners out there are going to be jazzed on the long run as well. And I'm thinking,
even if people are training for a 5K, they're doing long runs,
For sure.
Like Emma Bates, who just, goes around the track a couple times, like does huge long runs. So
we have
everyone's got to build. We'll talk about the physiological adaptations behind it, which is always my favorite part of, like, here's why you're doing this. Because I think that, and this is something I talk about with my athletes that I coach all the time, is like, I actually really want you to be curious, and I really want you to understand why we're doing something and why we're doing it when we're doing it, because you'll be so much more invested when you understand what the specific physiology that's underpinning any given action is.
I think that helps a lot with the self-talk that goes into kind of coaching yourself through these harder days.
Yep.
I've been thinking a lot about our athletes who are running the New York City Marathon this
We've got
weekend.
a big crew.
Yeah.
Shout out to our NYC runners.
That's right. And it's just really cool to see kind of that crossover. Not all of these athletes run trail and marathon. Some of them are exclusively marathon runners, but they are very familiar with the long run.
Yep.
So it doesn't really matter what your specific discipline is. If you understand what the physiological benefits are, you're going to get more out of your training.
Yeah. So let's dive right into our hotter knots. I'm pumped on these. It seems like people have a lot of questions about supplements,
Yes, this is
which
a big
is
supplement day.
totally my jam.
Wow, you're excited.
I'm so excited.
Has any of this, I'll be curious if any of this is overlapped into YDS.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, big YDS overlap. This is actually one of the I feel like a third of our DMs are about this, but we get this question a lot. Creatine consumption along with protein post-run as a recovery mechanism. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanism. Creatine helps the body rapidly regenerate ATP. That's the quick energy currency that's used in muscle contractions. It's also like most well known in strength and sprint sports for boosting power output and muscle recovery. But it also does support cellular energy and reduces muscle damage after endurance training. So there's some evidence that pairing it with protein post-run can enhance muscle glycogen resynthesis and recovery. But I think it's important to, again, understand what the physiological mechanism that's happening here is, because if you, for some reason, are taking in creatine, but not in the presence of sufficient overall energy intake, then like you're undercutting those adaptations. So like with all of these interventions, you're going to get the most bang for your buck when your foundation is already dialed. So if you're already eating a great diet and you're already making sure to refuel with your with the correct balance of macronutrients after a run, then creatine can be a good sort of step to add to your post-run routine. But if you're not nailing the basics, then go ahead and skip the fancy powder. But this is something I'm excited about because this is one of the few supplements where there is a really strong research base here, and the scientific consensus is this can be a beneficial thing for athletes, especially in resistance and high intensity exercise. For endurance athletes, the research shows smaller but still real and meaningful perks like improved muscle glycogen storage, reduced inflammation markers, and faster recovery between hard sessions. So combining creatine, something on the order of 3 to 5 grams a day, with carbohydrate, guys, got to get it all, and post-run protein can help improve glycogen uptake into muscle cells. So
I want to cut in here and talk about some of the downsides.
Yes.
Because I have seen this in some of my athletes who have been experimenting with creatine, because we talked about this on a previous podcast. It was a while ago, so maybe not everybody has heard that one, but we broke down probably 5 research-backed supplements.
Yeah.
But water retention and bloating can sometimes be an issue with this supplement.
When your glycogen stores are fuller, you're going to retain more water, which is like why when you're doing a carb load before a race, you can sometimes feel a little bit bloated, or you might notice a change in you might notice a little change in how you feel. Don't be weighing yourself, especially in the taper for a race. But if you do happen to accidentally fall on a scale and look at the number, that number might be different than what you're used to, because when you have sufficient and or bonus glycogen on board, your body's also going to retain more water, which actually is beneficial, right? Because when you're exercising, being able to have glycogen and a little extra water in you is a benefit.
For sure. I do wonder, and maybe you know this, if that water retention impacts your ability to maintain normal core temperature or a lower core temperature.
What it does is that actually there is some evidence that creatine supplementation can help with heat resistance.
Interesting.
So you can actually, one of the benefits of having a little more water on board and full glycogen stores is there's some evidence that particularly in endurance athletes, you might feel better when exercising in the heat. So that actually is one of the evidence-based use cases for creatine as well.
Yeah. I mean, there aren't really any big safety concerns with that water retention. But I always to caution athletes, if you don't already have your big percentages dialed for your recovery, eating really well, again, already getting in carbohydrates and protein pretty readily and quickly after your sessions. If you're not sleeping well, the creatine's not going to be some kind of a miracle supplement that you take that's going to override your inability to nail the bigger percentages for your recovery. So it's a nicety, I think. It's not something that I recommend to athletes, but there is
we're really not
research.
in the business of wholesale recommending supplements at all. I would put creatine in the category of could be worth trying for, again, some folks, but again, with the caveat of I'm curious why folks would want to use it, because if you're feeling like you're having a hard time recovering and you think you're just going to throw creatine at it to try to patch the problem. Again, I'm not saying don't add it, but I'm saying let's get curious about why you feel like your recovery isn't very good, what might be going on with your sleep, what other holes might exist in your diet, and how can we address those I mean, ideally first, but also potentially in concert with supplementation. But there's no supplement on Earth that can make up for not taking proper care of yourself.
So, what do you think? Creatine, hot or not?
I mean, I mean, I feel like having a supplement that's not just like straight up a grift, like that almost is like, I'm like, yeah,
that's hot.
It's not a straight up lie. So great.
For me personally as an athlete, I say not hot. This is a supplement that I don't use.
Me neither.
For various reasons. One, I don't want to have to go through all of the concise thinking and the planning behind, making sure I have this many grams of this with the carbohydrates and it's just too much. I got a lot going on.
You already have your recovery shake routine dialed.
It's fine.
And you feel recovered, typically.
Yeah, totally.
And when you don't, it's because of something related to other than how well your muscles store glycogen.
Yeah, and so I'm going to go not hot on that one. I'd rather athletes focus on the big percentages and really nail them than to, shift towards these, I think, silver bullets that probably promise more than they can actually deliver.
I don't think this one is a silver bullet. I would say, again, make sure that your foundations are dialed before you start trying to buy a bunch of expensive powder on Amazon. But if your foundations are dialed, again, I'm willing to call this hot just because science exists around it. So That's how low my bar is for supplements.
Especially in the supplement industry.
Yeah.
Is there any science?
Has someone studied this in a woman?
All right, nicotine pouches during a run. Hot or not?
Spicy. Okay. Yeah. Well, so this was one I was really curious about. So the purported mechanism here is that nicotine is a psychoactive stimulant that binds to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, which increases dopamine and adrenaline release. So that can help heighten focus and alertness, which is similar to caffeine, but through a slightly different neurochemical pathway. So research, unsurprising, on nicotine and athletic performance is very limited and inconsistent. There's no big sample sizes out here. A few small studies might have shown minor improvements in reaction time or perceived exertion, but there's no credible evidence that exists that nicotine enhances endurance, VO2 max, or recovery. So again, thinking of this works in the brain a little less than in the body, so it's going to make things feel easier, but it may not actually change that performance output in a measurable way. It's not like you're actually running better or harder by anything that we can measure. You might just be like, oh my God, I just had a stimulant, so efforting feels a little bit easier. So I think that that's an important sort of thing to plug here.
Let's talk some risks here. This one big red flag that stands out with this is nicotine causes vasoconstriction. So it's a narrowing of the blood vessels and increasing heart rate and blood pressure.
Not ideal.
That isn't ideal for endurance athletes. We definitely want to have blood vessels that are not constricted. We want to have the delivery of blood, oxygen, and fuel to and from the muscles without any limitations. Very, very important for efficiency. Mm-hmm. These are literally the systems we're training.
Yes, yeah.
So, counteracting that's not a great thing. Mm-hmm. I would also say that it can be habit forming.
Yes.
So there could be long-term health concerns.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious, this is pretty addictive and habit forming. So big red flag for me there. So I would say at the end of the day, the evidence doesn't support any real performance edge. There were no studies I could find that had a real, here is how this measurably changes something. It just changes how you feel about things. And for me, for something to be a performance enhancer, it should theoretically enhance performance like caffeine, which is legal and, yes, still addictive, but in a different way that I think, is interferes less with people's health and well-being. So I'm going to be a nah on nicotine pouches, but I like the energy. I like the curiosity here.
Great curiosity. I'm a not hot on that as well.
Yeah, maybe skip the Zen for your long run.
Just hammer some additional caffeine.
Exactly.
Okay, nitric oxide.
Nitric
oxide supplements. I had to look this up. I had never heard of this kind of supplement before.
Yeah, so it's not in the 5, like, the ones that we usually point to as being, like, extremely, so it ties a little bit into beet juice. Anyway, backing up, nitric oxide, what it does is it acts as a signaling molecule that dilates blood vessels, improving oxygen and nutrient delivery to working muscles. So common supplements, a lot of people will try to get this in the form of beetroot juice, L-citrulline, or L-arginine to boost the body's NO production. So when you zoom out to look at the evidence, there's some moderate reproducible, so like people have been able to like do a study and then later different people go do like a similar study and they're able to get similar results, which is always like, if you're looking at something, reproducibility is always like a pretty solid bar of like how quality is this evidence. That nitrate rich foods like beet juice or leafy greens can reduce oxygen cost and improve endurance efficiency, especially in recreational and sub-elite athletes, which is most of the folks listening. However, the effect size is small, typically a 1 to 3% performance gain, so like less than super shoes. And elite athletes may see little to no benefit because their NO, their nitric oxide pathways, are already well optimized through training. So what I want people to hear here is you can get this adaptation through training. And like trying to shortcut it by hammering beet juice may not be the most effective way to do that.
Yeah, I think a big caveat here is that a lot of the supplements on the market rely on amino acid formulations that don't always convert efficiently to more NO in the body.
Yeah.
And so this means that results are going to vary pretty widely based on the product that you're using. I don't like that inconsistency there if you don't really know what you're
supplements
getting.
are totally unregulated, which is why I'm a huge skeptic about their usage in general, because they're not well controlled, they're not well regulated. Companies can make all kinds of wild claims, and a couple weeks ago there was a big, I'm sure you saw this circulating the internet, a study from Consumer Reports about lead in protein powder, and this is something I know I've gotten a lot of questions about because of my work with Your Diet Sucks. What I would say to that is like most of the products that were found to be contaminated with lead were these like vegan max boost, like huge, like where you have to take in a huge serving size, which is where a lot of the problem was, because you're just taking in like a larger quantity of protein powder, because they're like the supplements that were primarily contaminated were these sort of like weight gain or like body comp change oriented supplements to like quickly put on a lot of muscle mass. But there was not evidence that like in the levels that most people would be taking in protein powder, that you would be taking in enough lead for there to be actual like health concerns. Again, I don't want lead in our protein powder, but you know, if you read past the headline, every single expert was saying like this is not something that the majority of people should be immediately concerned about, but it never hurts to make sure that your supplements, especially if you're someone who might, like us, that's subject to drug testing, that it is safe, NSF certified, safe for sport certified, so that there's a third-party certifier that actually makes sure that what the company is selling you is what they say they're selling you. So I think that supplements are always like a really big proceed with caution zone, and my 10 cents would be let's regulate these things, guys, like food or drugs, because that's how we use them. And I wouldn't be worried about lead in protein powder unless you're just like absolutely guzzling a ton of like a few specific brands of protein powder, and that can actually be a really great way to make sure you're meeting your protein and energy needs.
Well, on the bottom line here, I think for nitric oxide is, you know what? If you like your beet juices, go for it. I'm not gonna like say,
eat your beets, eat your leafy greens.
It's good for you.
Eat a salad.
Have those beets. But the science, it doesn't support a big performance gain from using these supplements, especially if you are already a really well-trained athlete. If you're a non-elite, if you're more of a mid-pack runner, maybe you'll find a little bit of an endurance edge here, but I wouldn't expect some kind of like a magic overnight difference in your workout performance. And I think this is more of like a flashy claim rather than something that's going to like play out in a measurable way.
Yeah, again, like the best use of your time and energy is just going to be focusing more on your training and focusing on the overall quality of your diet, which likely would include lovely things like leafy greens and beets to support recovery and energy anyway.
All right, let's get into our questions from Reddit segment. A couple months ago, I completed my first ultra, a mountain 50 miler with about 15,000 feet in elevation gain. Since then, I've been burned out, more mentally than physically. A lot of stress at the moment, which isn't making motivating myself to train any easier. I really do enjoy running, but forcing myself to do intervals or run longer than 6 to 8 miles has me dreading them. I just want to go out and run some miles without focusing on pace or feeling like it's a chore. Despite that, my heart is set on running a mountain 100 next summer. I'm just afraid of losing all the hard work I put in over the last year by taking it easy the next couple months. Would 20 to 25 easy miles per week with some strength work mixed in be enough to keep me in good enough shape before I start to build again during the new year? Or would I be screwing myself over? So great. Really common question and scenario here. Post ultra burnout, even in elite athletes is real.
Yes.
We see this a lot.
Have you ever been burnt out on running?
Fall I think for me is like that kind of like transition period. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I try to race late into fall to prevent some of that burnout, having an event on your calendar so that you have something to be focused on and energized specifically about. Really purposefully using an extrinsic motivator to help continue the training process. As that sun angle dips down, the days become shorter. Yeah. Our bodies kind of go into like a restorative mode. Mm-hmm. We're getting ready for like the long winter ahead. And it can be a tough time, especially if you have packed in a bunch of training over the past, 8 months. Yeah. And you've maybe already accomplished your A race. Like this athlete did a 50 miler with 15,000 feet of elevation gain. That's a significant race. That sounds like a lot of hiking to me. I would just say that this scenario is normal. Yes. You're going to need time to rest and recover from that race and the training. Mm-hmm. But we also know that there's a lot of science involved in this kind of decision making, and we understand the timeline. Or there should be. Yeah, there should be. Like there can be if you take a step back and don't make your decision such an emotional thing. Yeah, I think, reading this the first time through as a coach, my first sort of thoughts are this is normal. I do want to validate this. I think something that people get wrong is that people who are elites, pros, or are seeking excellence in the sport, I'm ability agnostic. You can be seeking excellence at any pace and any body 100%. With any objective. But I think people that are seeking excellence don't rely on motivation to get out the door. Because, for me, I don't even check in with, I do know that, I'm someone that tends to be quite motivated, so if I'm ever feeling a very serious dip in motivation, I know that means I need to chat with my coach because it means there's something pretty serious going on under the hood. If you're someone that's really motivated and you're feeling a little burnt out, that's something you want to talk with a mentor, a coach, someone about in terms of it indicates there's a lack of balance. But I feel like if you get to a race and then you feel like you want to take months off after because the training was so hard, to me, that indicates this might not be an appropriate goal for you because it put you in this place of such profound disbalance that if you want to take again, it's very normal to take a little break after a big race. It's very normal to want to reprioritize different things, prioritize things differently. All of that is good and normal and something people should think about. But if after you complete your 50 miler or your marathon or whatever it was, if it asked so much of you that you feel the way that this person does in this question, I don't think that was an appropriate goal for you. And I think you should choose goals that allow you to feel a little more balanced. Well, let me yes and no you on this. Great. Because I completely agree. We have discussed this, time and time again. If you feel like you're crushed after your race, after you've had an adequate time for recovery, 1 to 2 weeks, if you feel like you can't start to really return to training gradually after that, maybe that race was a leap. Yeah. And so therefore that goal wasn't necessarily appropriate for where you were at that time. Yeah. I think athletes do have to step back and, talk with their coach and understand the context there. But I do want to challenge you a little bit, because these ultras are hard. Yeah. The training is hard. Yeah. And that does deplete mental stores.
Yes. I mean, that I'm not arguing against the reality of that. I'm saying if you feel like you need to take months off. I think even if a month of reduced running, I think anytime you're getting past 4 weeks of really feeling like you need to change your relationship with running, I'm saying that should be a moment of inquiry. I'm not saying bad, wrong. I'm saying that is when you really need to take a good hard look at where you're making these decisions from. And if it's out of this, I always have to do the most epic thing possible, and then you go out and you do the Ure 50 and it takes you 24 hours and you're totally wrecked, and then you don't even want to think about running or hiking for weeks and weeks, that may not be an appropriate stretch goal.
I do think it's normal after stretching to have trepidation around doing hard training for a short period.
But
that doesn't mean we're not going to train. Yes. That doesn't mean we're not going to stay engaged.
Correct.
I think if you're worried about preparedness for your next race, which this person
I would say this person needs to not do this 100. Yeah, is my maybe honest 10 cents.
Maybe there needs to be another 50 miler.
This is my hot take of the day. If you want to run a 100 miler, you better fucking love training, because you're about to do some training. And if you don't like training, pick a different goal. That's the reason I like 100s is because I like training. And if you don't have that current relationship with training, that's fine. Honestly, that's very normal. Congratulations on having a healthy brain and beautiful, wonderful, balanced life. But you need to pick goals that set you up to live the kind of life that excites you and makes you happy. And if picking goals leads you down this path of misery and feeling constantly spread thin and constantly overstretched, I think the problem is the goals, not you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would caution a little bit, listeners, it's the way that this plays out is pretty individual.
Yes.
You're one of those people who is very intrinsically motivated.
Very true.
That is a trainable skill that most people in the general public really lack. They have to pick a goal. They have to pursue that goal in order to get out the door. That's what we see in our coaching practice, and that's what we see over large population groups.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people come to us with an extrinsic motivator, and then our goal is always to work with people, identifying their values, identifying what their actual intrinsic source of motivation is, so that we can connect them to that for a more long-term and healthy relationship with movement, with sport that's less dependent on, the sort of shifting winds of motivation.
I totally agree, and I think here's where kind of the science, we can use the science to kind of help direct this athlete into a period of training.
I'm just critiquing the question rather than answering it. I'm sorry.
Well, I know it hits
it bums me out. It does, because if by the time you finish your race you hate running, that is the work for me. That just breaks my heart as a coach, because my goal is always to get people to the start and finish lines happy and healthy. Big emphasis on the happy. Right. And if the running isn't making you happy, we need to have a hard talk about what's going on and why. Because it's not going to feel fast, fun, and easy every single day. But if it's making you miserable, if it's robbing joy from your life, we need to chat about why.
So I think that's a fair point, and that's why, we have these recovery periods after big races. And in these periods, that's when adaptation is happening. So you can rest easy and not really worry about that next 100 miler, because during the recovery phase, you're actually adapting, your body's getting better. So the mitochondria, the capillaries, the connective tissue, that all changes in that recovery period. Your body kind of goes through an upgrade process, but that's only if you allow it the time and the space to recover. Having a phase of training, for our athletes, typically it takes them, depending on the race length, 1 to 4 weeks to really start to get back to their normal volume after an A race.
Yeah.
Those periods of downtime are really necessary. They're also necessary from a psychological perspective. We have to regain our mental stores so we can be ready to do hard things again in the future. 20 to 25 miles easy per week. I don't really know what your normal volume is, so it's hard for me to say with any
we have a percentage here.
Right. So we can use 40 to 50% of your peak training load to help you maintain your fitness during this time. I would advise to gradually get back to 100, close to 100% of your normal training load. You can use Training Peaks or Strava or whatever you use to track to look at where your floor is over the past year and the past 6 months to determine where those numbers should fall. I think that this is one of the things that athletes get most wrong.
Yes.
They freak out and they feel like they have to get back to where their floor is really fast.
Yeah.
And then they undermine their recovery. They undermine their mental recovery.
Yes.
And so then when we go to train hard later, the burnout really comes out because they were not adequately recovered.
Yep.
But we don't have to do that much to maintain fitness.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And again, I think we put out a podcast a while back about the timelines of various training adaptations, which is really cool, or even we put out a minimum dose episode, both about running training and strength training. But what's important to see is that the timelines of the stuff is like remarkable. Like you lose fitness crazy slow. And I think that so often what it comes back to and like is so much more about how an athlete feels. Because like one of the first things that does decline is your neuromuscular efficiency. So how quickly you feel like you're able to get your legs turning over and how coordinated you feel, you do lose that pretty quickly, but you gain it back even quicker. But oftentimes it leads athletes to feeling more out of shape than they actually are because mitochondrial density and fat oxidation enzymes decline extremely slowly. Like usually it would take like 4 to 6 weeks of complete rest, like not doing anything. So even with some light aerobic work, VO2 max and endurance capacity remain shockingly stable for months.
Yeah.
But you are missing that opportunity to build. And I think the cycle that a lot of folks get caught in is they overdo it. So they feel like they have to take a ton of time off or they get injured or they get burnt out and they feel like they haven't been engaging in living life. And so then they have to take 3 months off. And then they're like, I signed up for this 100. So then they have to train like a they try to train like a crazy person for 3 months going into their 100. And lo and behold, because they hadn't been doing anything in the 3 months before that, the 3 months immediately before their race feel crazy. So they get stuck in that same cycle of burnout. So I think it's about zooming out and having like just spreading that workout a lot more for a more solid foundation, a more solid and structured baseline.
I agree. I recommend that athletes take that 4 to 6 week period and stay at 50% of their floor, mix in some strength and mobility throughout the week so they still have that muscle tension, so they're able to maintain their muscle fiber recruitment and injury resilience, all of that. Stay engaged in the process. One of the things, if you're feeling very, like doing hard things is tough. I don't want to do something that feels hard. Do your strides, do your workouts, but keep them well within your threshold for what feels hard. Make those workouts about getting easy wins.
Yeah, easy wins are great.
Yeah, and then that way you're still engaged in the process. You're not fully letting go. And I would also recommend, like, if you're going out and you're running and it just a day feels more mentally challenging than another, just do the lower end of what you're prescribed to do. It's okay to cut those runs short.
Yes.
You don't need to continue to push through those mental barriers to get some of these gains, especially if you're within that 4 to 6 week period.
Yeah. In this sort of timeline, I usually tell my athletes to err on the side of like quit while you're ahead. Like stop running before you feel like you need to. Yes, when we're training for a big event, we do need to stretch ourselves. We buckle down and we hold ourselves accountable to not shortchanging ourselves. But that is always a spectrum in training and is so individually variable. And there's always going to be a time where it's going to be beneficial to be like, you know what? I ran for 45 minutes. That rocks. I'm done. And like, I'm quitting with like my tank mostly full, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever it is.
I think your ability to do that and exercise flexibility in your training says more about where you're at in the process than how many weeks you can stack, 25, 30 miles in a row without fail, without missing a day.
Yep.
All right, let's get into the main body of the conversation. 5 ways to nail your long run. The science, strategy, and execution guide.
Yeah. So here I would say, I think that long runs are something that athletes sometimes put too much emphasis on. It is important, but again, like especially training for an ultra, we have an episode specifically about how long should your longest run be for ultras in our catalog. At most, your long run is going to be a percent of a percent of a percent. So we never want athletes to get too attached to like, I have to get in the longest like, you know, it's zoom out. Don't overemphasize the long run. Yes, it's sexy and it looks great on Strava or whatever, but again, it's just one component of the training with very specific adaptations. But you know, I think that we wanted to point out some common traps that athletes fall into, like running their long runs too fast, which means that you're accumulating unnecessary fatigue and missing out on the adaptations that you actually want, making fueling mistakes or not choosing appropriate terrain. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the long run and how to get the most of it. But long runs work because of specific physiological adaptations, and you can only trigger those adaptations when you nail the right intensity. So the long run isn't just about time on feet, it's about creating a controlled metabolic stress that forces your body to adapt. So here I'm going to be defining a long run as a run over 90 minutes. So one of the things that is going on is mitochondrial biogenesis. So that helps your cells build more mitochondria, which you might remember from 6th grade biology as being your aerobic, like the power plant of the cell. And that happens best and most effectively at low to moderate intensity. So we're thinking like zone 2 here is where that's going to be the most impactful. Again, really go back and listen to last week's episode about steady state, making sure you don't veer into zone 3 where you're going to be shortchanging that adaptation. I think athletes always have this tendency to be like, well, they err on the side of pushing a little too hard, whereas typically the adaptations we're actually looking for happen when you err on the side of being a little bit easier, with the primary goal being executing the effort correctly.
We also have a process called angiogenesis where capillary density increases. New capillary networks form around muscle fibers. This helps improve oxygen delivery and waste removal. Easy running, like, literally helps to build maybe better plumbing within your body. I like that.
And because it uses oxygen, you need to make sure you have sufficient oxygen for this adaptation to occur, which means you need to absolutely be running at that aerobic effort.
Right.
We're also working on glycogen storage expansion. So depleting glycogen intentionally, like running longer than 90 minutes, teaches your body how to store more glycogen for next time. So this is a process that we call glycogen super compensation, and what this does is it literally helps your body build a bigger fuel tank. You can have more glycogen on board, and your body more effectively knows how to utilize it.
And we also have fat oxidation efficiency. Wow, okay.
Yeah, fat oxen.
Fat oxen, yes, oxymoron. So after 90 minutes, the body shifts to burn more fat as fuel. Again, this is really important for athletes to kind of underscore and remember. We become more efficient at utilizing oxygen when we do aerobic training, running within 65 to 75% of our max heart rate, not by going into training underfueled or by restricting. We can fuel normally. And once we start to really exceed 90 minutes, our body will more naturally shift into a fat burning mode. We're beginning to train those systems. So this also helps to train glycogen sparing and efficiency. So key for going long without bonking.
Yeah, so again, this is why it's so important that you really stay locked into that zone 2 unless there's a specific moment in the long run where you're doing a steady state or a threshold workout or something similar. Because if you're going too hard, your body's going to be burning more carbohydrate relative to fat, and one of the adaptations we're looking for is that ability to burn fat. However, since you are zooming through your glycogen stores, the body doesn't work in like a black-white, like fat, carb. Like it's a spectrum depending on your output, and running long helps improve both fat oxidation and glycogen utilization. So it's a win-win if you run at the correct intensity, which for many people means being a little bit slower.
The other key to this is musculoskeletal conditioning. So gradual impact strengthens tendons, ligaments, and bones. And adaptation only happens with gradual, consistent loading on the musculoskeletal system. So these long runs are not just helpful from a physiological standpoint, but they're also helpful from a strength perspective.
Yes. Yeah, it solidifies the chassis while working on the engine. We're also looking at neuromuscular fatigue resistance. So running tired, not like excessively tired or like too tired, but running tired in terms of like you've been running for more than 90 minutes helps improve motor unit recruitment, like how well your brain talks with your body and how well it's able to recruit the parts of your body to do their jobs. So that will help build and improve your ability to run strong, well, efficiently, even when fatigued.
The key here is most of these adaptations kick in after 75 to 90 minutes.
Yep.
So you really have to be out there for a little bit of time in order to start to work on these systems. If you run too hard and you accumulate too much damage quickly to the muscles, you're not going to get these same adaptations. If you're running too hard, we're not going to have the same benefits. We're not going to have the mitochondria continue to improve. We're not going to have angiogenesis occurring. We're going to kind of undermine those adaptation processes.
Yeah. So the second thing, this is a top 5 list.
Top 5,
to mention, but you know there's only 5 things. No, it's just a fun heuristic I like. But let's talk about pacing those long runs. So many runners will run their long runs a little too fast, which can cost both adaptation and recovery. If you run too hard, you're not going to be provoking those physiological adaptations we just talked about, and you're going to be shortchanging your recovery because you're asking more of your body than you might be able to meaningfully replenish. So one way that I always like to check my athletes' effort through Training Peaks and diving into the data is I'm looking at their intensity factor, at what percentage of their threshold were they running this long run, and I look at heart rate drift, which is a big one, which means that towards the end of your run, your heart rate creeps up while your pace either stays the same or declines. And a lot of times what that can indicate is improper pacing because your effort keeps increasing, like you started too fast. So you're never able to like fully get your heart rate back under control. But it also, that's an imperfect heuristic because heart rate drift can also be caused by inadequate hydration or inadequate fueling. So usually for me, that's a point to begin investigation rather than like me pointing the finger and saying like, you need to slow down. It could be that. You could be tired, you could need more water, you could need more fuel. But I think that looking at your heart rate drift is always a good metric to like sort of be like, am I keeping my effort in check? And that's one way of ensuring that.
I think another way to ensure this, and this might be for some of our more advanced athletes out there, but you could consider trying to finish your long runs a bit faster than when you started.
Yes.
So maybe the last 15 to 20% could be at like a race effort or higher in your zone 2. And this can help to build fatigue resistance. It can also kind of put you in a mental state earlier in the run where you're not going as hard because you know you need to push a little bit later. So it
having that like negative split mentality.
Helps you with your pacing. You could use this throughout your training every few weeks, depending on what your specific race goals are. It's a way to spice things up and hold yourself accountable. Terrain adjustments are also really important. So if the terrain is flat, practice pacing. It's really easy to keep a consistent pace when the terrain isn't changing, when you don't have to look out for rocks, roots. It's one of the great reasons why I really love road running in the winter. Helps you just really focus on...
And because you don't have an option.
Yeah, there's no
so
option
you have
here.
to love it. You can either make peace with it or you can be angry all winter long.
Yeah, and if your terrain is hilly or, if it's rockier, again, that focus needs to really return to RPE. It's very, very important to shift away from pace, output levels, and really focus on how a run feels. That's going to be the best way to ensure you're still getting the right adaptations and you're leaning into 65 to 70% of max heart rate.
Yep. And again, thinking of tracking your volume in time and not miles, and making sure that even while your pace may vary over uneven or technical terrain, your effort should stay very disciplined and should stay even unless you are doing a workout. But again, like if you want to get the adaptations that we're looking for here, we want to build base, and easy pace is going to be key. The ego really can't be the one calling the shots here. And if you feel wrecked for more than like 2 days after a long run, you went too hard, and we need to investigate what's going on with your recovery.
I feel like so many athletes have an overinflated sense of how fast they should be running their long runs.
Yes.
And what they should be doing in terms of like pace and output. And herein lies, I think, a big part of this that we didn't touch on. Is like the reason why we ask people to continue to check in with how they feel, use RPE, is you have to build self-awareness as an athlete for the training to be effective. And it's really, I think it's a really critical piece to the puzzle, putting the ego aside, making sure your expectations are actually in alignment with what you can do. How many workouts have you had in that week leading up to your long run? Maybe I'm not going to feel quite fresh. Maybe the hills are going to feel a lot harder because I just did a hill workout 3 days ago. Take that stuff into account. If you're not thinking about that before you go out onto your run, you're kind of mindlessly training, and that's not very effective. Mm-hmm. And you're going to set yourself up to like probably push through some of these important thresholds that we don't want to break in the training process.
Yeah, and it's normal to feel some amount of fatigue after a long run, but if you're feeling like you can't like scrape yourself off the couch, or like you're wrecked for multiple days, that is when there's cause for concern. If you're training for like a longer race and like you do an 8-hour run, like you're gonna feel, there's outlying circumstances where we're aiming for super compensation and you're gonna feel pretty bottomed out, but that is not how we should feel the majority of the time. So like you should feel the effort. You shouldn't walk the whole thing, but if you're feeling like totally wrecked, a lot of times that means we need to look at hydration and sodium intake. We need to look at fueling. We need to look at pacing, or potentially your long run is too high a percentage of your overall volume, and therefore it's too much of a metabolic energetic reach for your body relative to what it's prepared to do.
All right, number 3. Fuel and hydrate like it's race day.
Yes. So I think that it's really important that athletes treat their long runs like nutrition dress rehearsal. Practice fueling now so that on race day it feels automatic. And I think one of the biggest shifts I've made in my training over the past years, I used to focus on my nutrition maybe in the like 10 to 8 to 6 weeks before a big race.
Yeah.
And now if I'm in a training block, I'm fueling my long runs like race day. Like, rather, I used to sort of be like, oh, I'll eat some snacks and, like, some candy. And, like, now I'm like, you know what? It's just never second gels and gnarly. And I nail it. Like, I am always getting my stomach to that place where things feel automatic, so that on race day, like, it's just so easy. So I think that people should start practicing their race day nutrition much further out than they think. Like, if you're in a training block, be practicing that. I know there's always that inclination of like, oh, but it's expensive. But like, you know what? Like, let's get that gut dialed in. And it's even more expensive to go out and DNF your next ultra.
Right. Like, it's expensive compared to what? Not fueling your runs?
Yeah.
So I feel like that idea that it's expensive is just like, this is kind of the cost of doing the thing that you want to do. And if you're going to do it,
that's not where I would cut
you
corners.
have to do it well.
Yeah.
And we know so much more about how much fueling adequately and hydrating adequately impacts not just performance but health, recovery, that to me this is definitely one of those corners you can't shortcut. Like if things are busy, fuel even better.
Yeah.
If things are busy, run from your house instead of driving to the trails. But don't forget to take your fuel with you.
Yes.
So why fueling matters. Glycogen stores last 90 to 120 minutes. So after that, you're starting to run out of gas here. If you're not putting more carbs in, your performance is going to start to decrease.
Yeah. Some bro science nonsense I see a lot is that, like, folks on Reddit or people will be like, I heard from this guy in my run club that you have enough calories on board to go a marathon without fueling. And it's like, technically, individually, no, there's just no way that's possible. But when your body is not that discriminatory where when it thinks about where to get that energy from. So your body doesn't just think, oh, this person is running fasted, I'm just going to burn fat stores. It's going to start using your muscles, and it's going to start basically drawing from your bones as energy. And so even if technically you have energy, fat stores, nutrition on board without fueling, which I'm doing air quotes for the people who aren't watching, don't do that. That is not a thing. Your body will start to burn tissue as fuel because it doesn't just say, oh, great, I'm just going to burn fat. So if you are not taking in sufficient energy, you are doing harm to your body.
All right, fueling strategy. Let's talk about this for just a couple minutes. Start early in your long runs. Yep. In the past, we've talked about starting 30 to 45 minutes into a run. The best athletes in the world are starting much sooner now. They're starting about 15 minutes into the run, and they're really trying to get maximum amount of carbohydrates even within that first hour. So here's some target intakes you can think about: 30 to 60 grams of carbs an hour for runs more than 90 minutes, 60 to 90 grams of carbs an hour for runs greater than 2.5 hours. And there's going to be some individuality here.
Obviously, yeah. You do over 90, I do 85. Yeah. Typically. Find what works for you. But again, the key is to eat enough and to not delay taking in that energy. There used to be this idea that if you delayed energy intake, you would, quote, lock your body into fat burning. But right. If you're executing the correct effort level, your body's fat burning anyway. So start to get those carbohydrates so that you're not getting don't wait till you're running on empty to start refueling the gas tank, because practicing running bonked doesn't make you more efficient at running bonked. It just makes you less efficient overall. So, yeah.
Hydration. We want to make sure we're hydrated before activity, especially workouts and long runs.
Even when it's cool outside, because you are still sweating.
Absolutely. Maybe 8 to 12 ounces of fluid with electrolytes before you head out there. And you should be pre-hydrating even further out than that. So you could be thinking about 2 hours before the run. Are you drinking a little bit? Are you getting some electrolytes in? During exercise, this is going to vary widely based on your individual kind of physiology, biology.
I'm always reluctant to put too many numbers to this, but also the best thing you should do is figure out what works for your physiology through, at minimum, a fluid loss test, through ideally fluid loss in concert with sodium concentration, so that you can make sure that you're replenishing 70 to 90% of your total lost fluid and electrolytes. Don't aim to replace 100%, 70 to 90, but it's so variable. I've seen athletes that need 200 milligrams of sodium an hour to over 2,000 milligrams of sodium an hour. So it's such a huge spectrum that I feel a little queasy putting a specific number to it. But if you're someone who isn't paying any attention, I would start with building a baseline awareness of what your current, what are you currently doing? How much fluid are you currently intaking? And what is, how many electrolytes or how many milligrams of sodium are you taking in per hour tends to be the most important, but not the only one to look at. Build a baseline, assess how you feel there, and then toggle it up and down and see where you feel better. That's a lot of trial and error, and if you're wow, that doesn't sound like very much fun, and I would really love to not ruin a perfectly good pair of running shorts, then I would recommend doing either a precision hydration or a level-in sweat test.
Yeah, just get the sweat test done. It's a one-time test.
As much as a pair of shorts.
Yep, it really is worth the money.
Yep.
Again, we're talking about things that are so important that they affect how you perform, how you recover, how you feel in and outside and all around your training. So you might as well make the minimum investment to know exactly what you need, and then everything can be dialed in around that.
Yeah. The biggest mistakes we see folks make around hydration and fueling are running fasted. Again, there is extremely, the evidence here does not unequivocally point to training depleted making you better at burning fat, or there's been this idea that if you practice bonking, you'll get better at bonking. Just don't fucking bonk.
Don't bonk.
Fuel correctly. And the whole premise is flawed because it doesn't actually work. So it's sort of like, oh, well, why, if you want to get better at running on a broken leg, train running on a broken leg. No, just don't break your leg. So don't run fasted. That is a huge red flag. It can be, I mean, especially for female athletes who are hugely sensitive to inadequate energy intake and even inadequate carbohydrate intake. It really increases that risk of bone injury because it harms your bone reabsorption factors, and it's going to undermine your recovery for athletes of all sexes. So don't ignore hydration. I think a lot of times if folks are having like GI issues, they're just, a lot of times I'll see athletes get frustrated and they throw their hands up like, oh, gels just aren't for me. I can't take in that many grams of carbohydrate. But so often it's because they haven't dialed in their hydration in concert with their nutrition. Because if you're not getting in enough fluid, and if you're not getting in enough sodium, or you're getting in too much sodium, that's going to make it harder for you to digest whatever sports nutrition or fuel you are taking in. So you have to look at these things as an overall piece of the puzzle.
And practice this stuff way before your race.
Yep.
I think you were alluding to, Zoe, and we're going as far as to say, just do your race fueling all year round. Mm-hmm. It's fine. It'll help you. It'll help you see where there's areas of weakness in your fueling plan.
Yep.
And it'll, over time, kind of force you to diversify what you fuel, what you use, which will help you in these longer events.
Yep.
A couple key takeaways: fuel early and often. Don't wait until you bonk to start fueling. It's too late. And gut train early in your training.
The gut is like any other part of your body. It is extremely trainable. So if you're having issues with nutrition, the answer isn't just, oh, well, not going to focus on that. The answer is focus on it more, train your gut. It's a choice.
Yes. All right, let's get into number 4 here. We're going to test our gear. We're going to run on race-specific terrain. We're going to get as specific as we can to prepare for the races we're doing.
Yeah, so another thing that I think is really important for marathoners, ultra runners, whatever you're racing, the long run is an amazing opportunity to use it as a dress rehearsal for your training. So start identifying what shoes feel best for you in any given terrain. Make sure shoes are, you don't really need to like break in shoes in the way that people really think about it, because you're not actually softening the shoe. They're not made out of leather anymore, but it's a good idea to, you don't want to bust out a brand new pair of shoes before your next race. You want to test your apparel. You want to test your race kit in similar conditions where you're put, like if you need a shell, where are you putting it in your vest? Get used to like setting your vest up in the way that allows you to actually use it so that if you need to get something out of it, you don't have to like sit down and take it off. Make sure that you're packing your vest in a way where like you can be as efficient with moving things around and getting things out of your vest as possible. And identify any spots for potential chafing early.
Yes. You don't want to DNF because of chafing.
No.
Oof. Okay, terrain and specificity. So we want to match our race terrain to the specificity of our race.
Yep.
Get out and try to find an elevation gain or change per mile that is similar to what you're going to see at your race. I think this is the first place for people to start. Second thing is the technicality of those trails. What do those trails look like? Do some investigation. Figure out what kind of terrain your race is on, specifically the hardest parts or the cruxiest parts of the race, and try to train or replicate that in training. Course recon is especially helpful in these situations. Going out and actually checking out the course will allow you to understand what the specific demands are of that event.
Yeah, so yeah, again, I think that, and if you're someone who like lives in the city, you're training for trail and ultra races, or you're living somewhere where it's hard for you to access very specific terrain, remember our podcast a few weeks ago on repeated bout effect. So if you're able to get a couple or like 2-3 weekends on similar terrain where you're able to mimic those that race terrain specificity, especially when it comes to descending, you don't have to go and, ideally you're not hammering every weekend, but in a perfect world, you're going out to the trails and running on specific terrain as much as possible. If that's not feasible for your life circumstances, even a couple weekends of doing that can be a way to sort of bridge the gap between where you are and where you need to be on race day, because if you're able to go out and do a couple really focused weekends of descending, that's enough to provoke adaptations to minimize some of that breakdown on race day.
Yeah, and as you're on that specific terrain, you're getting into those environments that are most similar to your race, so you can kind of work on some of those other gear specifics for your event as well. Like, how's your vest fitting? How is your hydration system? Using poles on that terrain if it's a mountain race. All of that kind of stuff really becomes center in your training at that time.
Yeah. Then the last thing I wanted to talk about is structuring your long run progression. Long runs in your training should not be random. They should be really strategic and fit very intentionally into your training plan. So some general rules, kind of zooming out, is that the long run is usually going to be 20 to 30% of weekly volume, depending on how advanced an athlete you are and what your goals are. But again, prioritizing tracking volume in terms of hours and time rather than just distance. And particularly when it comes to steep or technical terrain for mountain races, vert over mileage. You don't have to get too obsessive about the vert. Ideally, you want to match it to your race specificity, and like, don't go train on the Hard Rock course if you're training for the Berlin Marathon. But trying to, like, people get so addicted to like long runs. It's all about how many miles it is. No, the best proxy for stress is going to be time rather than distance.
So a couple things if you're self-coaching here. Maybe you're in a base building phase of training. You could think about running your long runs between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours, really in that span. That's going to help with a lot of the adaptations we talked about in the beginning of this call. If you're training for a trail half or a 25K, long runs should probably be between 2 and 2.5 hours. 50K, 3 to 4 hours, peaking at maybe 4 to 5 or 4.5, depending on the length of that 50K. 50 milers, maybe 4 to 5 or 6 hours. And we're really starting to incorporate back-to-back runs to simulate the stress of what it feels like to run the second half of that 50 miler. I think that's really, really important. As these races get longer, it's harder to simulate the stress in one singular run of what it's going to feel like to do that race. And it becomes really risky to do runs more than 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
So we can use back-to-back long runs to help develop the fatigue resistance, the durability, and to simulate what it's going to feel like to be running with fatigue.
Yeah.
100K, you might peak around 6 or 7 hours in training, maybe up to 8 if you're an advanced athlete. 100 milers, again, probably somewhat similar. Would likely like to see a race in there that's maybe 8
just
hours
going
or
from
so,
base building
hours.
to a hundo is spicy.
Yeah, it is spicy. So you have to really think about some of these general rules of adding 10 to 15% on per week. Having cut back weeks to help with the adaptation process where we're cutting by 30 to 40%, and just continuing to incrementally build up over long periods of time. Mm-hmm. One of the things that athletes get wrong is like their build, their race specific, the specificity or like their race specific phase of the build is so short. Mm-hmm. That they have to pack in a really rapid progression of long runs that puts their...
We call that panic training.
Panic training, yeah. It puts their musculoskeletal system in a state of high stress, and it makes it much more likely that we're going to get injured.
Yeah. So again, I think zooming out, focusing on how consistency beats hero runs. Like, the long run is important, but it's not the primary predictor of ultra running success. It's something we want to get right when we can, but don't get like overly focused on it. Make sure you're fueling early. Make sure you are sleeping well. Keep focusing on that mobility, foam rolling, and rest. And remember that the purpose of long runs is to build your endurance, not to fluff up your ego. And I think so often, like, yes, there can be an emotional component to like doing a sexy long run can make you feel prepared, but it's better to be prepared than to feel prepared. And remember to progress slowly and plan cutbacks. And stress plus rest equals adaptation. And you need both elements of that equation in order to progress.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks guys for listening. Just a quick little summary here of what we went over. Your runs need to be in zone 2 for them to effectively help you build fitness. Fuel early and often. Test gear, terrain, and race conditions well before the event. Like, we like to have these longer swaths of race-specific training for athletes, so they're very prepared for the event that they're going into. That's going to help them be more successful. Progress gradually. If you're self-coaching, make sure you schedule in some of those deload weeks or cutback weeks. 30 to 40% cutback can really help to bring in more time to recover, so that way you can continue to build up that long-run progression. And recover like it's part of the job. Like it literally is. If you want to train hard.
That's when the adaptations happen.
Yeah. If you want to train hard, you have to recover hard too. They don't happen separately. They're part of the same process.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. And as always, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Would love to get some hot or not topics from the community. And we'll see y'all next week.